Hi, welcome to another episode of the Sankofa Pan African series. So, at the beginning, you talked about the reason why you moved to America with your mom in search of the American dream. So, what is the American Dream and Promise Act?
So,
And DACA and all these things. I mean, they've been in the news a lot lately. What is it?
so the Dream and Promise Act is actually HR 6, which is probably one of the most progressive pieces of legislation that has been passed before in the United States Congress during the Trump administration. So the Dream and Promise Act was passed to create a pathway to permanent residency and ultimately citizenship for DACA recipients. And DACA are those children who came to the United States with their parents undocumented, who are contributing to this country in so many different ways, but they just have a work permit and their permit to attend school and to work and so on. And then the act was also to create a pathway to permanent residency for what you call TPS, which are those folks who have temporary protective status. So it's the people that their countries have been hit with some kind of natural disaster or political instability. They come to the United States to seek refuge. And the goal is for TPS, it was an executive order by President Barack Obama. The goal is that once your country reaches some level of stability, you will go back to your country. But what we're seeing is that a lot of those countries, they have not reached that level of stability. And also the people who are beneficiaries of either TPS or DACA, they have given so much to this nation. They have utilized their talents and their ingenuity to make to make the United States a better place. These are folks who are home buyers, so that means they are paying taxes. They are business owners. In fact, there was a research. There's been countless research done that shows that TPS and DACA recipients are homeowners and own businesses and are productive members of society. So Congress, the House of Representatives, wanted to provide them with a refuge, because if you were to deport those folks, I think it would have a detrimental impact to the American economy. So even if you want to look at this from a selfish lens, and you want to deport those folks, yes, you can deport them, but think about the impact that those deportations will have on certain sectors within the American economy. So it was passed in the House of Representatives, but the Senate has yet to pick it up under the leadership of Mitch McConnell. I would like to say that I'm optimistic, but it is an election year, so you never know what's going to happen. There's still time for the leadership within this United States Senate to act on this critical piece of legislation.
Mm. So, can you just imagine people who are waiting, whose status in the U.S.?
Exactly. So, for example, for TPS recipients in Haiti and a few other countries, the designation expires February 2021. So,
Wow.
can you imagine those who have TPS status and they're trying to figure out what is next? What am I going to do with my life? Am I going to be deported in a few months? So their lives is kind of like in the shambles. And in the past, what the Department of Homeland Security has done is the department has given them an extension. And I think people at this time, they are tired of extensions. They want a permanent solution, because you get an extension for a year and then a year later, you're back in the same situation you were in a few years ago. So we're waiting on the congressional front. We are waiting to see what the Senate is going to do. But we also have a court case, the Nielsen case, that could determine the fate of those individuals. So we'll see. We're waiting on the legislative process, as well as the judicial process to see what the Department of Homeland Security will do ultimately.
Okay, thank you. Now, going back to your work um, in the way in which U.S. foreign policies, especially aid, impact the lives of Africans. Can you illustrate a bit more? Because these are things that I think, African countries need to pay more attention to.
Yes. So for example, I think this is the most recent. Well, there's been a lot of things happen, but we'll talk about the U.S. withdrawing from the World Health Organization. What does that mean for the African continent? We know countries in Africa are what you call developing nations, so they desperately need the support of the World Health Organization in order to provide health services and to prepare for pandemics such as COVID-19 in their respective countries. So the United States, being the number one funder of the WHO, will have a significant impact on the continent and her people. The U.S. administration indicated that it will work with other multilateral organizations to provide the same services that the WHO was providing to countries all over the world. But the reality is the WHO has been around for such a long time, has a very good understanding of cultural practices. Because when you're providing services to countries, you have to understand the cultural challenges. Because without that, you will fail. You have to understand the culture, the politics, and the geopolitics as well, not just politics of that country, but politics within that region when you're providing services. So it was a decision that I thought initially that the U.S. government was not going to move forward with because it does not serve in the interest of the U.S. Nor developing nations. So I was really, really surprised to see what transpired.
So let's talk a bit more about the politics around aid or diplomacy. Maybe not so much politics. How does it work? When America or the European Union or the UK and countries give aid to developing countries, even though our preference would not be aid, our preference would be to be allowed to trade equally and fairly and be more in control of our resources and our finances. But until then, we're stuck with this aid thing. But how can we strategize more, to see that it benefits us better?
Yeah, I think that you're right. I think most African countries would prefer to not have to rely on aid for the development of countries and so on. And I think His Excellency Nana Addo delivered a beautiful speech in front of President Macron. Yes, indicating that this is the vision he has for Ghana. But like you said, until we get there, we have to rely on those aid. But I think that even in that conversation, there's work that can be done on the part of foreign governments in Africa to ensure that the aid is properly allocated and that it is allocated in a manner that is consistent with the priorities of the country or the government. Because the U.S. government, because the appropriations process, right? If nothing happens in Congress, there's one bill that will always pass. That is the appropriations bill. That's the bill that tells you how much money you're going to spend, where you're going to spend it, where it's going, who it's going to, all of that. That bill passes every year. You can always count on that. But in the process of funds being allocated, as a foreign government, you do have a say-so. Through the State Department, through USAID, through the White House, through Congress. And what you can do is you can ensure that, let's say, and usually aid is not allocated foreign assistance in most cases is not allocated directly, let's say, to President Buhari, to his administration. It is allocated to the State Department, USAID, and those two institutions then, um, you know, sometimes gave subcontracts to other companies or NGOs that are doing work on the ground, and they too do work on the ground around democracy, human rights, and so many other aspects. Uh, but again, you have a role to play to ensure that how those funds are used on the ground are consistent with your own priorities. How many countries have a foreign policy plan, for example? Because that foreign policy plan will serve as a guide as to what your priorities are as a state. And what I would recommend is that, let's say that um, the Nigerian government, for example, wants a more aid for military, which is probably not going to happen right now because there have been so much. There's been a traffic in persons report that came out that shows children are being used as military personnel in Nigeria. So you probably would not get any aid for military right now. But let's just say, hypothetically speaking, right? You could find a member of Congress that the country has a good relationship with and has been working with consistently, and say, this is the aid this is the area that I'll need more funding for. Then that member of Congress will take that proposal and submit it to the Appropriations Committee. And I will also recommend that the officials reach out to the U.S. Embassy, the State Department, and make similar recommendations to make sure all of those parties are on the same page. And then what you will see is when the funds are allocated, there could be a line item budget, let's say, for military spending, particularly for Nigeria, because you've lobbied for that, you have asked for that. So what I've seen is that a lot of times countries are more reactive when the budget comes out, if they even know about it. They're like, oh, we have X and Y, there's X and Y and Z money going to, let's say, human rights, right, or democracy. But it would be better if countries, especially developing countries, are more proactive in these processes, because you have a voice. There is a part for you to play. And I think it's important, because I think a lot of people don't know that. And one of the reasons why the aid does not go directly to these developing countries is because of accusations of corruption. So instead, it is given to, that funds are allocated to USAID, the State Department, then they execute projects on the ground accordingly. And usually they do it in a way that is consistent with the priorities of the country. But I would like to see more of a proactive voice in the appropriations process by governments all over the world.
Yeah, thank you very much for a very stimulating session, Johanna. I really, really appreciate your contributions. Thank you. Thank you for watching. Don't forget to subscribe to the Sankofa Pan-African series channel. Like our videos, and please share them with your contacts.